Have you ever wondered what it takes for a single promise whispered beneath an endless sky to echo through 4 millennia and still shape our world today? Imagine standing on a windswept hill in ancient Canaan, the sun bleeding crimson at your back as a lone wanderer pauses beside his tent. This was Abraham, bent by years yet buoyed by a covenant that defied borders and kingdoms. Picture Sarah, her laughter once bright as summer rain now tinged with sorrow, clutching hope so fragile it might shatter in the desert wind. In that moment, every footstep, every altar of rough-hewn stones, carried the weight of divine purpose far beyond any human plan. This is not just a story of distant ancestors. It is the story of every one of us, poised at the edge of promise and peril, yearning for a destiny that outlasts our doubts. Today, you're invited to step into the footsteps of those first pilgrims of faith and ask yourself, could the same covenant that called Abraham also call you to something greater? If you're ready to uncover how a vow spoken in dust and breath still resonates in our lives, share your thoughts below and let us embark together on this sacred journey, one that will transform the way you see promises, borders, and the very ground beneath your feet. Now, let us turn from this threshold of wonder and begin the unfolding saga. Before there were borders, there was a promise. A crimson sun slips beneath the horizon, painting the windswept hills of ancient Canaan in molten gold. In the still air, dust motes drift like silent witnesses across a landscape untouched by walls or armies. Imagine a lone figure standing beside a makeshift tent, lantern flickering against the dark. He is Abraham, bent beneath the weight of years and hope. His eyes trace the horizon as if seeking a whisper of what lies beyond. Long before chariots or empires, Abraham carried a covenant cradled in his heart. In Genesis 12 verses 1-3, God spoke through the haze of a desert dawn, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation and I will bless you and make your name great." The words echoed like thunder in his soul yet held the gentle promise of life. Could it be that a single vow uttered beneath an endless sky would ripple through millennia, shaping destinies far beyond one man's tent? Picture Abraham's footprints pressed into dry earth. Each step carried him further from familiarity toward a horizon alive with unseen possibilities. His wife Sarah, laughter once bright as summer rain, now softened by the ache of childless years, stands near the tent flap. In her gaze flickers both faith and fear. What must it feel like to wait year after year for a son promised by a voice that spoke in dreams? To clutch a hope so sacred it trembles on the edge of despair? With each dawn, Abraham built altars, rough stones piled like pulsing hearts in the wilderness. Smoke curled skyward as if the land itself breathed in his worship. He planted no fields, raised no walls, yet claimed the earth by a promise older than memory. In the hush between his footsteps and the wind's sigh, he heard the divine cadence: promise, dust, return. Motifs that would become the lifeblood of countless descendants. Could any human decree carry such weight that stones and dust would echo its truth through ages? As centuries slipped by, that promise found form in 2 sons born beneath the desert stars. First came Ishmael, sprung from hope and Hagar's tears. Then Isaac, laughter mingled with grief. In Genesis 17 verses 19-21, God reaffirmed the covenant. "But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him." 2 brothers playing beneath the same sun yet bound by destinies destined to diverge. 2 motes of dust rising against the eternal sky. Imagine the brothers, youthful laughter weaving through the tent, the soft thud of sandals on packed earth, the golden glow of dusk illuminating their shadows. And yet, beneath every game, the seeds of sorrow ripened. 4 blessings spoken to one voice carried echoes of exclusion in another. In the tender hush of twilight, Abraham would have watched them, heart torn between the pull of promise and the ache of a fractured household. And what of Hagar's exile, Ishmael wandering toward the wilderness of Paran with only a skin of water and a child's cries? Could those parched tears planted the seeds of generations scattered across deserts? He will dwell over against all his kindred, God promised Hagar in Genesis 16 verse 12. Bones rising again, breath breathed anew, motifs of exile and return. The land stretched vast and empty, yet every grain of sand bore a sacred signature. As night deepens, stars pierce the heavens like watchful eyes. The constellations that once guided wandering herdsmen now bear silent testimony. Empires would rise from the dust, Egypt, Babylon, Persia, yet the covenant's promise endured, woven into the very fabric of earth and sky. Could the bedrock of a promise withstand the weight of empires built on war and conquest? Ancient Canaan did not know borders. Its hills and valleys rang with the footsteps of nomads and the echoes of divine decree. Here, beneath an open sky, Abraham's descendants would learn both blessing and heartbreak. They would taste milk and honey yet stumble in exile. They would hold keys that no longer fit any lock yet clutch them with hope that blood and dust might one day align. As the wind whispers through the olive trees that would one day line the hills, one hears the soft murmur of questions carried on the breeze. Could the same land cradle two peoples bound by a single promise? Could dust and breath unite tribes whose narratives diverged at the cradle of history? What does it mean to inherit earth itself when the very soil is claimed by sacred words? Tonight, the hills of ancient Canaan lie quiet, moonlight pooling like silver on stone. Yet in the silence, the covenant's heartbeat still echoes. Keys of promise jingle unseen in pockets across desert sands. Bones of ancient promises stirred in the dust wait for breath to reanimate them. And so we stand at the threshold of history's first act, beholding a world shaped by a vow that stretches beyond borders, empires, and time itself. What will become of that promise as it journeys through thousands of years? How will the children of Abraham carry this inheritance of land, memory, and faith? And could it be that the story of two brothers in a windswept valley holds the key to understanding why, even today, hearts still tremble at the sight of Canaan's hills? The desert wind carries whispers of departure as dawn's first light brushes the horizon. A host of thousands stands at the edge of memory and promise, faces turned toward the spectral silhouette of towering dunes. Moses, staff in hand, surveys the sea of humanity behind him, ancient Israelites born of promise yet hardened by bondage. Could it be that the same covenant breathed through Abraham now courses through these chains of people? Long years had passed since the footprints of Abraham faded into the sands. The Israelites multiplied under Egyptian sun and shadow, their bones crushed by the weight of labor yet their spirits unbroken. In Exodus 3 verses 7 to 8, God's voice rang from a flame that danced upon a burning bush. I have surely seen the affliction of my people. I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to a land flowing with milk and honey. The words emerged from the bush like living embers. Bones rising again, would this promise carry them through the storm of deliverance? Imagine the plagues descending like judgment and mercy entwined. Rivers turned to blood, skies cloaked in darkness, locusts devouring every green shoot as if the land itself mourned. At each plague Pharaoh's heart hardened, yet beneath the scourge the Israelites watched with trembling hope. Could the earth itself bear witness to a covenant older than kings? In the hush after each calamity, a remnant whispered questions born of ash and promise. When at last Pharaoh's chariots thundered across the plain to reclaim escaped souls, the sea bore witness. Moses lifted his staff, waters heaved into walls of liquid crystal, and the people crossed upon a bed of dust and breath. Then the sea returned, swallowing enemy and doubt alike. In that moment, the covenant lived anew in every heartbeat, promise refashioned in the crucible of liberation. What does it feel like to step from bondage into freedom when the ground you walk feels both holy and trembling? Upon Sinai's heights, thunder rolled like the voice of eternity as Moses received tablets inscribed by God's own finger. Exodus 31 verse 18 testifies, He gave to Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him on Mount Sinai, 2 tablets of testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. Stone upon stone, law upon law, a covenant written in breath and fire. Could any mortal covenant match a divine decree carved into the very bones of creation? Back in the valley, the people fashioned a golden image while Moses lingered among the clouds. The calf glimmered like false sunrise, flesh rising without spirit, promise emptied of breath. Yet even in betrayal, the covenant endured. Moses interceded, his face radiant from communion with the living God, reflecting the paradox of mercy through wrath. Could forgiveness itself become the living echo of an ancient vow? Generations passed, and Joshua led the covenant people across the Jordan's flood, waters parting beneath his outstretched hand. At Gilgal, stones were set as silent sentinels, witnesses to a people reborn on foreign soil. Each artifact of memory, each altar piled high, became a testament. Promise, dust, return. Could stones collected in haste in a strange land ever still the longing for home? Under David's anointed reign, Jerusalem rose from hill to hill like a heartbeat resurrected. The Ark of the Covenant paraded through city streets, priestly voices chanting ancient psalms, as joy and reverence intertwined. In 2 Samuel 7 verses 12 to 13, God spoke through Nathan, "When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, and I will establish his kingdom forever." The promise of a king fashioned not by human hands but ordained in celestial counsel. Could any crown born on mortal brow eclipse a divine appointment? Yet even in David's glory the shadow of exile flickered. The child of promise sinned, and the land itself recoiled at broken covenant. Nathan's confrontation brought year upon year of ashes and grief. Yet through the repentance of a broken heart, the promise persisted. Bones rising again not only through deliverance but through the dust of human failure. Could God's promise withstand the fractures of fallen humanity? Solomon built a temple of cedar and gold, a sanctuary where covenant and creation might meet. The stones rang with incense and prayer, spaces alive with the echo of Abraham's wandering. In 1 Kings 8 verse 27 Solomon prayed, "But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you." A temple to house the infinite, promise materialized in wood and stone. Could any structure born of human hands contain the breadth of divine promise? Centuries later that temple lay in splintered ruin, ruins smoldering beneath Babylon's flames. Exiles marched toward a distant horizon, each step echoing the ache of return. In Ezekiel's vision, dry bones rattled beneath a foreign sky. Ezekiel 37 verses 5 to 6 proclaimed, "I will cause breath to enter you and you shall live, and I will lay sinews upon you." Exile's promise written in bone marrow, a covenant of restoration whispered across the winds. Could hope blossom in a field strewn with relics of destruction? Thus ends the second chapter, where promise took shape through liberation, law, conquest, kingship, and exile. From Sinai's fire to Babylon's ash, the covenant threads weave through dust and breath, binding a people to a land and to a destiny beyond borders. And as the moon rises over ancient ruins, one question lingers upon every stone. If bones can rise in a valley of death, what greater miracle awaits when return meets promise at last? Dawn's rosy fingers caress the gleaming stones of a city reborn. Jerusalem stands anew beneath the azure sky, its walls echoing with the footsteps of returning exiles. From the river Chebar and far-off Babylon they came, rags of hope wrapped around ragged memories, led by prophets whose voices still trembled with divine breath. Could it be that the covenant, forged in desert fires and tempered by exile, would find fresh life upon these ancient hills? Under Persia's tolerant hand, King Cyrus proclaimed in Isaiah 45 verses 1 to 2, "Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, I will go before you and level the exalted places." These words danced across the edict that allowed the exiles to return and rebuild. Imagine weathered families carrying masonry tools and Torah scrolls shoulder to shoulder. The temple lay in ruin, its sacrificial altars toppled, its holy court strewn with rubble. Yet each stone cleared from the sacred precinct was touched by trembling fingers. Each splintered beam recalled sacrificial smoke rising like a bride's veil. They laid foundations amid tears and singing. Psalm 126 verses 1-2 rang through the gathering crowd. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter, and our tongue with shouts of joy. Could joy and grief intertwine more tightly than vine tendrils clinging to old oak? Under Zerubbabel's leadership, the altar stood once more, its embers glowing beneath the open sky. Layers of dust, centuries deep, gave way to new offerings of lamb and grain. Yet obstacles loomed like specters. Samaritans watched from distant hills, their own temple on Mount Gerizim humming with rival devotion. Persian satraps weighed arguments in royal courts as local adversaries whispered of sedition. But prophets like Haggai thundered through the rubble, "Consider your ways. Is it a time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses and this house to lie in ruins?" Haggai 1 verse 4. Their words fell like chisels against hardened hearts, sculpting resolve where only comfort once dwelt. Decades passed and the Second Temple rose in new splendor. Its polished stones gleamed in the sun, its cedar beams scented the dawn. Pilgrims thronged from Galilee to Idumea, their prayers weaving through colonnades like living threads. Each festival pulsed with covenant memory, from Passover's shepherd's blood to Pentecost's gleanings. Could this temple ever capture the glory of Solomon's shrine? Perhaps not in form, but in witness it breathed divine promise into eager lungs. Then came the Hellenistic tide. Alexander's army stormed across the region as conquest's drumbeat summoned a new era. Greek became language of court and market. Gymnasia rose where elders once prayed, and purity laws clashed with Greek customs. Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated the temple, erecting foreign altars and naming Zeus within its courts. Maccabees rose in crimson fury, brothers wielding torches and faith against the imperial machine. Judas hammered the defiled stones, rededicating the altar in 164 BCE. Hanukkah's lights shimmered in candlelit windows, symbols of flame igniting hope against the darkest night. Could a flicker of oil burn through centuries of oppression? The miracle whispered that even the smallest spark bore witness to covenant's fire. Rome's eagle soon circled overhead. In 63 BC, Pompey breached Jerusalem's walls, his legions stamping out independence like fragile flowers under iron boots. Herod the Great emerged as client king, rebuilding the temple on a scale that dwarfed its predecessor. Marble staircases swept up to massive courts, and Solomon's portico gave way to towering colonnades crowned with gilded capitals. Pilgrims gasped at the sight, a sprawling palace of stone and faith. Could grandeur of architecture mirror grandeur of promise? Romans came to offer incense, Jews to offer prayer, and beneath the same sky they wove stories of divine kingship and imperial power. Within these courts walked a humble carpenter's son. His words drifted like seeds on the wind, "Blessed are the peacemakers," his voice fluttering amid polished pillars. In synagogues and fields he spoke of dust and breath, comparing hope to mustard seeds that grow into mighty trees. Could a covenant older than Egypt bend toward gentleness? His followers collected words as embers, carrying them beyond Galilee's olive groves, lighting hearts from Damascus to Rome. Yet authorities saw tinder ready to ignite revolt. In the shadow of the temple they crucified him, nails piercing flesh upon wood stained red. And in dawn's hush, an empty tomb whispered of breath returning to bone. "He is not here, for he has risen," the angel declared in Matthew 28 verse 6. Bones rising again, not only a promise to Israel, but a hope for nations shackled in death's grip. Decades later, Jewish revolts burned like dry brush under Roman sun. In 70 CE, Titus' legions breached the temple walls. Flames roared as wood and incense coalesced in smoke. Siege towers cast long shadows over suffocating streets. Refugees huddled in caves around Masada, their silent songs still echoing in desert canyons. Could the covenant survive when its sacred house lay in ashes? A remnant carried Torah fragments into diaspora's wine-dark seas, their voices rising in prayer at synagogues built for memory. Yet history's tide could not erase those ancient promises. In the 5th century, Islam's crescent rose in Arabian skies. Caliphs entered Jerusalem in 638 CE, sealing sacred precincts under new guardianship. Dome of the Rock gleamed gold amid olive crowns, echoing Solomon's vision of God enthroned above the cherubim. Muslims, Jews, and Christians stood beneath the same arc of heaven, each tracing covenant threads back to the Father of Nations. Could one city cradle multiple heirs without tearing the tapestry? Through centuries of crusades and reconquest, of Ottoman sultans and British mandates, the stones of Jerusalem endured. Each conqueror left footprints in the dust, each faith unfurled banners within its walls. But deep beneath, motifs of promise, dust, return, bones rising, breath returning, remained interwoven. Could any empire containing such layers of story stand untouched by their pull? As candlelight flickers in modern streets, pilgrims and politicians traverse the same cobblestones trod by priests and prophets. The covenant's echoes resonate in prayers at the Western Wall, the call to prayer from Al-Aqsa, the hymns in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Could the same sacred ground yield unity rather than strife? Or will the weight of promise and pain continue to shape each footstep? Tonight, as stars crown the Temple Mount, the air carries questions older than empires. What does it mean to inherit land sanctified by divine decree yet claimed by shifting hands? How does one reconcile the ashes of destruction with the breath of resurrection? And could it be that beneath every stone and scroll, under every footfall and prayer, the covenant's heartbeat still calls two peoples toward a destiny neither fully grasps? Here ends the third act of this ancient saga, where exile met return, where law met grace, where conquest met faith, and where death bowed before resurrection. And as the night enfolds the city's trembling lights, one question remains suspended across the hills of time. In a land shaped by promise and sacrifice, who will heed the call to breathe life into covenant's next chapter? A pale morning light filters through olive branches, illuminating the ancient stones of a land worn by centuries of footsteps. From the heights of Mount Carmel to the shores of the Mediterranean, the air still hums with whispers of empires past. Under the red banner of the Ottoman Crescent, this region, woven of promise and dust, slumbered in the embrace of imperial slumber. Could a realm born of conquest cradle the covenant's echo without quenching its sacred flame? For 4 centuries the Ottomans ruled, their governors' mantles shaded by minarets and mausoleums carved in sun-baked stone. Jerusalem's walls bore the fingerprints of sultans who sought to preserve harmony among faiths, Christian pilgrims threading through Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Muslim faithful ascending to Al-Aqsa's terraces, Jewish supplicants tracing prayers along the Western Wall. In this fragile tapestry, each thread shimmered with covenant memory. What does it feel like to walk in marketplaces where languages tangle like braided rope, each word carrying the weight of millennia? Yet beneath the surface of peaceful routine, the modern world stirred like restless bones. In European salons, ideas ignited like wildfire: liberty, nationalism, human dignity. Jewish communities in Eastern Europe faced pogroms that spilled blood across frozen fields. Theodor Herzl envisioned a return to Canaan's hills, a refuge forged in ancestral promise. His words crackled across smoky rooms, a homeland risen from ashes and breath. Could hope kindle a nation from the embers of exile? Simultaneously, Arab intellectuals and ulama debated the meaning of nationhood across coffee houses in Beirut and Damascus. The Arab awakening spoke of unity spanning desert sands from Mecca to Aleppo. Yet for residents of Palestine, their identity remained tethered to olive groves and family tombs, to dust-stained threshing floors where ancestors' song lingered in every grain. Could two awakenings converge upon the same soil without collision? When World War I shattered the Ottoman world, British forces swept through the Levant like a tide reclaiming abandoned shores. In 1917, General Allenby entered Jerusalem on foot, his boots imprinting upon cobblestones that bore the weight of prophets. He paused at the Jaffa Gate as if hesitant to disturb the silent prayers echoing within the walls. Across the Channel, Lord Balfour penned a letter pledging support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. The words fell upon history like charged thunder. Who could have foreseen how a simple letter would fracture dreams into opposing hues of triumph and tragedy? To Jews scarred by pogrom and persecution, the Balfour Declaration shimmered like fulfilled prophecy. Promise rising from dust seemed within grasp. Yet to Arab farmers clutching deeds worn smooth by plowshares, it cut as betrayal, soil sanctified by ancestors now promised to strange hands. Imagine the ache of a life's work measured in furrows and fruit trees overturned by a pen's stroke. Under the British mandate, Palestine transformed into a crossroads of longing. Jewish immigrants arrived on swaying ships, Torah scrolls bound in tarpaulin, hope blazing in their eyes. They planted orange groves and drained marshland, breathing new life into parched earth. Laborers hummed hymns as tractors carved fields. Could the covenant's promise find fresh root in newly plowed ground? Meanwhile, Arab villagers gathered in olive groves, smoke curling from mud brick ovens as wise elders recalled stories of Ishmael's bloodline and Canaan's ancient stewards. Artisans wove riddles of prophecy into tapestries. Children learned of the caliphs who once guarded holy precincts. When British authorities proposed quotas and commissions, heated gatherings erupted in dusty courtyards. Which voice carried the weight of rightful claim? Could justice be measured in verses of scripture or in census reports? Riots and revolts flared like wildfire across hills and valleys. In 1920 at Nebi Musa, pilgrims clashed with soldiers, a firestorm of rumor and resentment. 2 decades later, the Arab revolt surged like a tidal wave, its leaders marching beneath banners proclaiming unity and independence. The earth trembled beneath the boots of insurgents. Promise seemed poised to breathe anew in an Arab state carved from historic lands. Yet British tanks rumbled through the hills, quelling uprising with gunfire that echoed across time. Simultaneously, Jewish defense groups formed, Haganah men patrolling orchards under crescent moon, Mossad Lu'aliyah bet smuggling refugees past naval blockades. Each clandestine mission wove another layer into the fabric of return. Could clandestine hope outpace official decree? By midpoint of the mandate, the land had become a crucible of competing narratives. Oil lamp glow revealed exhausted faces and planning cells. Arctic winter winds of Europe froze continents apart, yet flames of conviction burned at opposite ends of Palestine. Archaeologists unearthed Roman amphitheaters near Beit Shean. Historians' quills traced covenant lines through scroll fragments at Dead Sea caves. Could past and present converge into a shared tomorrow, or would they forever remain at war over the same dusty tombs? As dusk draped the hills in violet shadows, a lone olive tree stood sentinel atop a terraced field. Its gnarled roots delved into millennia of soil, each ring of its trunk a silent chronicle of seasons past. Beneath its boughs the land's children gathered, Jewish farmers counting saplings against the sky, Palestinian shepherds counting stars to guide their flocks. Could they ever imagine sharing this ancient tree, its fruit laden with covenant's legacy? With each sunrise the conflict deepened, lines drawn in sand and blood, walls raised in fear and hope. The covenant's heartbeat pulsed beneath the surface, neither silenced by empire nor erased by mandate. Stones of old still whispered promise. Winds carried prayers to the same stars that once guided Abraham. And as the olive tree swayed against the wind's lament, one question lingered across aged bark and tender leaves. In a land born of promise and contention, could two peoples learn to share the breath of covenant rather than draw swords beneath its name? A pall of smoke drifts across the scarred hills as dawn breaks on November 29, 1947. Under a pale Mediterranean sky, Delegates gather in New York, their voices echoing through marble halls. The United Nations General Assembly unveils Resolution 181, a partition plan slicing ancient Palestine into two states. Could parchment lines drawn thousands of miles away ever capture the contours of dusty hills and olive groves tended by generations? On one side of the world far from Jerusalem's walls, delegates debate borders and minorities. On the other, children in Jaffa's narrow lanes chase pigeons, unaware that their lives will soon be scripted by distant votes. The plan promised a Jewish state on roughly 55% of the land and an Arab state on 45%, with Jerusalem under international trusteeship. To Jewish hearts the promise shimmered like fulfilled prophecy. Promise, dust, return etched into every syllable. To Palestinian souls it cut like betrayal. Dust stained by ancestral tears, promises unheeded. Imagine standing on a terrace slope near Haifa, orange blossoms perfuming the air. Jewish farmers greet a new dawn of sovereignty. Torah scrolls unfurl in synagogues with trembling lips chanting Psalm 126, "If the Lord restores the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream." In Haifa's port, immigrant ships unload refugees who survived Europe's darkness. Could bones once scattered across ghettos rise again on ancient shores? Yet mere miles away in Ramel, Arab families hold keys that no longer fit any lock yet are still clutched with hope. They gather beneath olive trees whispering stories of Ishmael's descendants rooted in Canaan's soil. Could covenants promised to Abraham coexist with covenants promised to Isaac? Their elders recall Genesis 16, where Hagar heard God's words to her son Ishmael, "He will live in hostility toward all his brothers." Could these words foreshadow the conflict to come? Tension ripples through dusty lanes. Calls to prayer mingle with Jewish Hazan song. Militia patrols weave among fruit trees, rifles slung over shoulders. Daylight brings skirmishes, stone-throwing boys, terrified civilians darting for cover. Each gunshot against whitewashed walls echoes a fractured covenant. Could the land that saw Joshua's trumpet blasts also hear the trembling of gun barrels? By May 14, 1948, the British mandate expires. The echo of departing Union Jacks lingers in Tel Aviv streets. Fireworks explode as David Ben-Gurion proclaims the State of Israel. In that moment, tears and laughter entwine like vines. Covenant's promise feels nearly tangible in the salty breeze. Psalm 137, "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill." A prayer for survival rising from survivors' lips. But across barren valleys, families clutch possessions wrapped in cloth. Smoke from abandoned homes curls into the sky like grieving hands. Palestinians mark this day as the Nakba, meaning catastrophe, where over 700,000 fled or were expelled from homes they had tilled for centuries. Their children would grow up learning the names of villages they never saw. Could hope survive in tents taken root on foreign ground? As conflict spreads, neighboring Arab armies surge. Egypt's forces pressing from the south, Jordanian legion advancing in the hills, Syrian battalions probing the Golan frontier. The ancient land becomes a battleground where promise and pain collide. Jewish defenders, many Holocaust survivors, fight to hold narrow corridors to Jerusalem's gates. Could bones rising again stand firm against invasion's iron tide? In Jerusalem's old city, narrow alleys run crimson with gunfire. The Jewish quarter falls under siege. In vaulted chambers beneath the western wall, civilians huddle amid oil lamps and whispered prayers to Ezekiel 37, "Where dry bones shall live." Could breath enter these bones to sustain hope in the maze of walled streets? On Mount Scopus, medical teams tend wounded under olive trees. On Mount Zion, children crouch in cellars as shells shake carved stones. Temple Mount's courtyards yield fragments of soot and shattered pottery. Could the land's ancient stones bear new scars without breaking? After grueling months of fighting, armistice agreements carve new boundaries. Israel holds about 78% of historic Palestine. The West Bank and East Jerusalem fall under Jordanian control, Gaza under Egypt. The promise of two states falters in the churn of war. Could the covenant's mosaic splinter into pieces too small to mend? In the aftermath, refugees swell camps across Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. Each camp a living testament to lives uprooted. Generations clutch rusted keys passed down like fragile heirlooms. Could a promise older than time heal wounds that sting with each sunrise? Inside Israel's new borders, survivors plant trees in memory of lost villages. Kibbutzim spread like green patches on parched earth. Hebrew language rises from ancient scrolls to modern radio. Covenant's breath animates new society built on dust and dream. Yet the Palestine refugee problem festers like an open wound. Could the promise of return breathe life into another covenant? International calls for resolution echo in corridors of power. UN Relief and Works Agency seeks to aid displaced families. Resolutions stack like unread scrolls in dusty chambers. Generations pass under camp tarpaulins, their eyes searching distant horizons for a home promised by history. Could hope endure where treaties falter? As the sun sets on 1949, the land lies pocked with scars and seeds of rebirth. Promise and pain share the same soil. Olive branches shimmer over battlefields that once brimmed with shepherd's song. Jerusalem's old walls catch the dying light, each brick a silent witness. Could the covenant's promise still pulse beneath the surface of contested earth? Tonight, the wind carries the scent of orange blossoms and gunpowder across valleys. Under ancient skies, two peoples whisper tales of dust and breath. Could they ever breathe the same air without breathing fire? As stars emerge above Canaan's hills, one question hangs in the silence. In a land forged by divine vow and human conflict, who will write the next chapter where bones rise again, not in war but in reconciliation? A fragile dawn creeps over the rolling hills of the West Bank, gilding olive groves in pale gold. Watchtowers pierce the horizon, their silhouettes stark against the sky. Could the same stones that once rang with Solomon's procession now echo with the tread of armored vehicles? In 1967, the Six-Day War transformed the landscape in a single breath. Israel swept through Sinai, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and Gaza, territories long steeped in covenant and conflict. Jerusalem's old city fell under unified control for the first time in millennia, the Western Wall thronged with prayers of triumph. Yet conquest bore its own weight. Millions of Palestinians found themselves under military occupation, checkpoints threading across hills like iron veins. What does it feel like to live under a presence you neither chose nor can escape? In the years that followed, settlements sprouted on hilltops once tilled by farmers whose families traced their lineage to Ishmael's line. Red-roofed houses clustered around newly paved roads, dividing orchards and ancient terraces. Could homes built in hope eclipse homes uprooted by fear? In refugee camps beyond the Green Line, voices rose in defiance. The first Intifada in 1987 saw children hurl stones against armored jeeps, their small fists embodying the covenant's echo of resistance. Rifts of tear gas and cries of prayer mingled in alleyways. Each stone became an altar built of desperation and faith. Could dust and breath find harmony in shouts of both sorrow and resolve? Across negotiating tables in Oslo, hands reached tentatively for covenant's promise of coexistence. In 1993, Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin shook hands beneath white flags, their gestures captured in a single photograph that glowed with hope. Rabin's words lingered, "Peace has no meaning unless sheltered in security, and security has no meaning without peace." Covenant's threads wove anew as agreements promised autonomy, mutual recognition, and the seeds of a Palestinian state. Could ancient promises blossom into modern accords? Yet dreams of statehood faltered beneath the weight of mistrust. Suicide bombings and targeted assassinations extinguished Oslo's fragile light. Could hope survive amid the smoke of shattered accords? As the new millennium dawned, the second Intifada broke like thunder. Car bombs shattered cafe windows. Ambulances raced through streets slick with rain and blood. Jerusalem's narrow lanes reverberated with the wail of sirens and the silent prayers of the injured. Covenant's promise seemed buried beneath rubble and regret. Could bones still rise when breath itself was snuffed out in darkness? In 2005, Israel withdrew settlers and soldiers from Gaza, leaving behind empty houses and silent schools. Yet closure of one chapter opened another of blockade and struggle. Rockets arced across the sky, each explosion a testament to entangled narratives of siege and security. Could the same land kindle both rockets and peace talks? The Iron Dome intercepted steel with steel even as mediators gathered beneath frantic skies. Covenant's motif of ashes and breath found grim expression in smoldering ruins and the tremor of returning life. Today, the West Bank's fractured autonomy exists amid concrete barriers and sprawling settlements. East Jerusalem's status remains a tinderbox where building permits and house demolitions ignite clashes at holy sites. Gaza endures under blockade, its children growing up among UNRWA tents and the hum of generators. Could a people imprisoned in fear and longing ever cradle reconciliation? Across global capitals, diaspora communities lobby under banners invoking exodus and the right of return. Their voices echo Covenant's refrain, "Dust may settle, but the promise endures." Yet amid barbed wire and ballots, moments of shared humanity flicker like candles against the dark. Joint medical teams treat the wounded regardless of nationality. Farmers from both sides once gathered for olive harvests, pressing oil under ancient presses. Musicians from Tel Aviv to Ramallah compose melodies that intertwine oud and violin, weaving lament and hope into song. Could art and compassion slip through the cracks of conflict to reunite fractured hearts? In recent years, the Abraham Accords offered a glimmer of a different narrative as Israel normalized relations with Gulf states. Emissaries shared tables laden with spices and smiles. Business deals were struck across ancient trade routes. Yet Palestinians watched from occupied hills, asking whether their plight had been sidelined. Could Covenant's promise of universal blessing extend without embracing every child of Abraham? On the streets of Jerusalem, young Israelis scroll on smartphones, their feet carrying them past shuttered shops and graffiti calling for 2 states for 2 peoples. Palestinian youth exchange memes of hope and protest. Their voices converge on social media platforms, where algorithms become invisible walls. Could a generation raised amid drones and hashtags rewrite the Covenant story? Beneath the same sky where a wandering shepherd once looked for stars to guide him, 2 peoples still stand at history's crossroads. The hills cradle memories of blessing and exile, of trumpets and gunfire, of stones anointed with oil and blood. Covenant's motifs, promise, dust, return, bones rising again, pulsate beneath every footprint. Could the next chapter unfold not in division but in shared breath? Tonight, as the muezzin's call intertwines with the cantor's chant and church bells toll in the distance, one question lingers above the city's ancient stones. In a land where divine promise and human conflict have danced for 4,000 years, who will dare to write a future where Covenant's breath binds rather than divides? As we've journeyed from the promise whispered in the desert breeze to the battlegrounds of exile and the triumph of return, we've seen that every stone, every scroll, and every shattered altar carries a reminder that God does great things through the smallest acts of faith. What began as a single vow to Abraham grew into a covenant that outlasted empires, survived the ashes of broken temples, and rose again in new generations who dared to believe. The real, practical lesson for us today is simple. No act of obedience or compassion is too small to change the course of history. When the Lord calls us to step forward in faith, even when the landscape looks barren, He makes our humble stones into foundations for something far greater than we could imagine. So let this story fuel your own courage. Plant your seeds of hope, build your altars of prayer, and trust that God will multiply your smallest offerings into blessings that touch lives and reshape destinies. If this message stirred your heart, please hit like, subscribe, and share to spread the hope. Then leave a comment with one step you'll take this week to act on your faith. Your journey starts now.